Now, somehow there's a lot of stuff I haven't said in the past 9 videos of this series, which you should check out if you haven't yet, because I'll be referencing a lot of it. But most of the things I could talk about, I don't have enough to say that is worth a whole nother video. So instead, we have this. We'll start with a classic, the Pixar Theory. The Pixar Theory states that all movies Pixar made are in the same universe. This, of course, includes the Cars trilogy. Now, I'm not going to go into the Pixar Theory too much here because there's plenty of stuff about it, and the Pixar Theory could take its own series to talk about, but I do want to bring up one thing. Around the same time I watched the Cars movies, I also watched The Love Bug from 1967, which is about a car that's alive in a normal world. In that movie, a character goes on a monologue about how some electric things, like cars and traffic lights, might be alive, and how the reason they would be alive is because we've pretty much made them smarter than people, and people put so much effort and care into them, so they start to think they are something. I'm paraphrasing heavily, and I would love to show the entire clip, but I don't think YouTube would be too happy about it, because it's a decent clip, so instead I'll put a link to it in the description. Now, the reason cars are alive in the Pixar theory is because of human emotions, or at least this mysterious energy that comes from humans. It's the same reason toys are alive in Toy Story. Now, admittedly, I'm describing this terribly, but the point is that the explanation for cars in the Pixar theory and the explanation for the love bug are pretty similar. So, my theory is The Love Bug is a prequel to Cars. Yeah, it's a stretch, but Man and Bulldog. So there's a lot of times in the movies where words that reference things that aren't in the world of Cars are mentioned. Man is used a lot, especially by Fillmore. There's a character in Planes called Bulldog. There's also a bumper sticker in Cars that says, "I got my kicks in Radiator Springs," which would imply feet. So what does this all mean? Well, you could go into the whole Pixar theory idea of people used to exist as these things are just references to the past, but what if I instead ignore them and just said they were random terms that didn't actually mean anything in the world of Cars? Like, come on, you don't have to go into every little thing in the world of Cars. That'd be ridiculous. Car biology. I talked a little bit about the biology of cars when talking about life and death of cars, but there's a bit more I could talk about that didn't really fit in there. But here's the thing about car biology. It's not going to make sense. They have all the parts of a car and most of the organs of a human too. There's not enough room in there for that to happen. Even stuff outside of the car isn't going to make sense. I mean, look at side view mirrors. Apparently, they let the car see behind them, but it's not like their eyes, which are their windshields, can see the side view mirrors. It doesn't make any sense, and that's okay. That's an established thing in the world of cars, that's just how side view mirrors work, so we accept it. Like we apparently just accept that this car has GPS, though I don't know how he possibly could. What we don't accept as much is the whole headlights situation. In general, headlights are just things that let cars see in the dark. But then we have the twins, who literally flash lightning. I love being me. Ugh, hate that. Which has connotations for what headlights are and makes other cars using them normally a bit weird. There's also a scene in Radiator Springs 500 and a half where Mater is wearing coconuts on his headlights, which continues that implication. Also makes the fact that Lightning doesn't have real headlights and Mater lost a headlight pretty weird. Speaking of vehicles doing things to their bodies, there's a car in Planes 1 that has got his parts changed around so much that he now can turn into a plane. Though, turning him into a plane also turns him into a completely different person canonically. And admittedly, I have no evidence for this, but I feel like those parts used to belong to a living plane, and that personality is that plane still trying to exist. Cars also rust. They rust so much that Lightning's sponsor is an anti-rust cream. It feels like it's advertised as an anti-aging cream, which yeah, I guess that makes sense. What doesn't make sense, though, is Lightning seems to act like rust is contagious, which is a little weird, though it may just be that in that scene, Lightning was still a stuck-up brat. So, speaking of rust, there's an extremely rusty character in Cars. So rusty that he is constantly shedding rust wherever he goes. His name is Fred, and he also loses his jaw, which makes things real weird because obviously they're not going to show a loose tongue just on the floor or hanging out from the top of his mouth because this is a kid's movie, but also generally cars don't actually have anything behind their lower bumper, but he does have a tongue when he has his jaw. This scene is also after he loses his jaw the first time, so I guess he got it back, which is good, but like, where'd his tongue go? Where did the rest of his mouth go? Did he get a replacement tongue? I don't have answers for this, I just figured I should bring it up. Then there's the whole animal situation I guess I should mention, where some vehicles like tractors and tiny planes and tiny flying cars are considered animals, but others, like all the characters we follow around, aren't. I don't really mind that some are considered animals. In our world, everything is a carbon-based life form. In their world, everything is just a carbon-based life form. Car food and digestion. So cars need gas to drive. They don't need gas to move, so technically they could walk, I guess, or jump, but they couldn't drive. This kind of makes sense, as cars in the real world need gas to drive too, and that seems to be the main source of food for cars in the world of Cars, as that is usually what we see them drinking, or being fueled like a real car. They do both, which is interesting. However, normal food also exists in the world of Cars, like ice cream, pistachios, and wasabi. Now, pistachios and wasabi make sense to exist at least, as plants do exist in the world of Cars. Ice cream, on the other hand, doesn't, as cows and other milk-producing animals don't exist. The cow equivalent in the world of Cars are tractors. So do tractors produce some kind of milk equivalent? Or is ice cream in the world of Cars just plant-based? Who knows? What I do know is that cars have a digestive tract, or something, that causes them to need to use the bathroom sometimes. In Cars 2, Mater uses a bathroom, there's also bathrooms shown in Cars, that has a bidet and everything. And honestly, it's kind of terrifying, and it doesn't make any sense. The reason he goes is because he thinks he's leaking oil, which I guess is the car's equivalent of pissing yourself, which is real cool. Better yet, this is a plot point because it turns out that he wasn't the one leaking, it was actually a car that was pretending to be electric. And the reason Mater realizes he's not electric is because of this scene, which kind of implies that electric cars don't have a digestive tract. So, do electric cars eat at all? I don't know. Cars generally don't eat in real life. Speaking of pissing oil, which is not a phrase I thought I'd ever say, oil seems to be the only liquid in vehicles, which yeah, but it's a bit weird when oil is the saliva, blood, and piss. Cars also do drugs, whether to get high, like Fillmore always seems to be, or to improve performance. Performance-enhancing drugs, in this case nitro, are literally a plot point in Planes because Dusty is only able to race because one of the planes that beat him in the trials was using nitro, which is illegal. Chug also has used it, and it's passed off as a joke, which feels a little weird. Speaking of nitro, there's a group of cars in the beginning of Cars that I'm pretty sure use nitro, and one of them sneezes a lot, and every time he sneezes, fire comes out of his exhaust pipe and he gets a boost of speed. I don't really understand this, but I am definitely confused. Do child cars exist? There's a few mentions of cars being kids in the world of Cars, like Cruz in Cars 3 talking about growing up, but there's a bit of a problem. They don't seem to have many years to grow up. We don't really get the ages of Cars usually, but the end credits of Cars 2 has Mater's passport, which says he was born in 1957. Now, obviously this is a lie because Mater is a god and clearly much older than that, but it gives us an idea of how ages are supposed to work in this world. And we see Mater when he was pretending to be 9 years old, in the flashback of Cars 1, where we admittedly don't see a lot, but we don't exactly see anything that would imply he's acting like a child. And, as presumably most of the residents of Radiator Springs are also around that age, that seems to imply that if cars do have childhoods, they are much shorter than ours. Car landscapes. There's a scene in Cars where there's tire track clouds, which at first I thought, oh, maybe they're just contrails, but those come from planes, and planes exist like normal in this universe. Well, if you consider them being alive as normal. So, I don't know. Maybe it's the manufacturer driving across the sky. Speaking of big cars in the world, there's a lot of mountains and such that look like cars in this world. And while sure, they may just be massive carvings, considering that I now think that cars grow out of the ground, it is possible that those are actually giants slowly growing out of the ground, ready to pop out and destroy everyone. Speaking of cars growing out of the ground, I failed to mention just how terrifying the concept of the tailpipe cave is in my last video. Like, that's if you wandered into a cave and parts of the cave were butts and then they farted on you. Okay, that doesn't sound very terrifying, but it would be. Equivalents. Sometimes there's a discussion about what the human equivalent of tires or paint is, but the thing is, they're cars. They don't need to have an equivalent. But since you're asking, tires are shoes and paint is body paint. Most cars just don't wear clothes. And I do mean most, because some actually do wear clothes, which makes it all the weirder. Lightning's track, get it, record. Lightning has won a total of 2 races on screen, and both of them were at the beginning of Cars 3. And we're supposed to believe he's one of the best, right? I mean, sure, it's mentioned that he's won other races, like the 4 he had apparently won at the beginning of Cars 2, but we didn't see those, so do we really know those happened? I'm joking. I don't actually expect Lightning to win races in the movies, as that wouldn't be as interesting. I just think it's funny. Dipper the Creep. Dipper of Planes 2 is a bad character. I didn't really mention her in my Planes 2 video because I was too busy complaining about Dusty being a bad character, but she's awful. She's a massive fan of Dusty in like a parasocial way and keeps acting like they're going to get into a relationship, though Dusty is clearly uncomfortable every time she brings it up, and it's all just played as a joke. Absolutely awful. Whoops, no dinosaurs. Alright, so apparently dinosaurs did not become oil, so that part of my last video was wrong, I guess. But I don't think that actually changes too much of my theory, so whatever. A conclusion of sorts. Back when I started this series, it was an attempt to get myself to stop talking about the world of cars so much to my friends by getting all my thoughts about it out here in some kind of format. And well, I think I did that. See, I figured if I was going to make this series, I should do it right. And doing it right meant watching all the movies again and taking notes on them. Now, here's the thing. I don't actually love the Cars movies. I just find the world to be very interesting. If you've seen my reviews of the movies, you've probably noticed that I didn't really call any of them really good. And turns out, watching a movie you don't really like in the first place to take notes on it is not a fun experience. Admittedly, it's probably not a fun experience on a movie you really like either, but my point is that Cars 2 is a garbage movie, and it took me literal weeks to finish watching it again while taking notes because I just couldn't handle dealing with it. Now, that's not to say I didn't have fun with this. I did enjoy it, especially when talking about the lore and theories I had and trying to come up with those ideas in the first place. But it's been a lot, so after over 2.5 hours of videos, I think I'm done talking about the World of Cars movies, unless new stuff comes out, and having an in-depth look at World of Cars take over this channel. Will I do something like this with a different series? If something interests me, maybe. And that doesn't mean I'm done with an in-depth look at World of Cars either. After all, I do own a Cars video game, so I might as well review it.